Okay, I think I'm going to start. Do you want to speak something first?
Oh, actually, I just want to greet everyone and welcome back again to the second sessions of Ajahn Denchai. So thank you so much, everyone. But this session will be more practical, and we're going to learn more about narrative inquiry. So thank you for being here, and please do enjoy this workshop. Thank you. Enjoy. And Ajahn, เชิญเลยครับผม Thank you.
Okay, so good morning, everyone on Sunday. Okay, today is the second week of narrative inquiry, and the topic of this webinar is narrative inquiry, research, or just stories. So at the end of the day, we are going to discuss a very important question that I posted in my webinar topic, which is, after you learn about narrative inquiry, do you feel that it is research or it is just stories? Okay, and let's okay.
Is it moving?
It's not moving. Hang on. Okay.
Okay.
All right. So last week we talked about philosophical and theoretical underpinnings of narrative inquiry. So for that section is very theoretical. And then we talk about narrative inquiry designs. And also we try out some of the tools to collect narrative, which are, interview, photo elicitation, and narrative frames. The topic of today will be analyzing, data analysis and authenticity, aesthetic of narrative inquiry, and writing representation of narrative inquiry. And I believe that I sent out an article, which is my own article. We will look at that article specifically in order to make it more practical. So mostly we will spend time discussing the article on student-teacher identity, and also I'm going to provide some tips for you. And as I said earlier, at the end of today, we're going to discuss the most fundamental question in narrative inquiry, whether it is research or it is just stories. Okay, so let me capture a little bit about what we talked about last time. Okay, so narrative inquiry, these are the goal of narrative inquiry is to understand human experiences, okay? But not any kind of experience, but focusing on experiences that are important enough, experience that people will care about, okay? When we study experience or when we study narrative, the purpose is not for entertaining, like reading stories in general, or the purpose was not about therapeutic, okay? And the second bullet point is the focus of narrative inquiry, which is we interpret narratives in terms of literature of the field. So the experience that are investigated has to be connected to the literature or to what we care about. And then narrative inquiry explore the particularity, okay? Focus on the particularity or the details from the perspective of the participants. One fundamental question for narrative inquiry is to say how people live their lives in a particular context, okay? And narrative inquiry emphasize co-constructed knowledge between the researchers and the participants to generate stories. One thing that narrative inquirer believe is that story is stored in human beings, right, as experience. Humans store their experience in terms of stories. Now, in order to generate the stories, we need two forces or two parties, which are the researcher and the participant themselves, to generate stories. And meaning making is central to narrative inquiry. So these are 5 important points that we discussed last week, okay? Now, I want you to look at the practical side of narrative inquiry. If you can pull out the article that I sent out last time on student-teacher identity, which I published, right? So that is at one example, okay? It doesn't mean, it's not necessarily mean the best example of narrative inquiry. I will show you why, okay? So one example that I sent out to you is I explore student-teacher experiences in learning to teach during the teaching practicum, particularly learning to teach English, okay? And what I want you to do is I want you to think about these 5 questions. Whether when you read the article, do you see these questions reflected in the article? Okay. So number 1, in general, what do you think about the article? Okay. What do you think about the article in general? Whether easy to read, difficult to read, challenging, those type of thing, okay? And number 2, what's the gap of research? Remember, we talk about here that we need to interpret narratives in terms of literature in the field, okay? Now, what's the gap of that research? When we talk about gap, it means that what are our current state of knowledge, okay? What do we know? What do we know about the article, okay? Previous literature, what do we know? And what's wrong with what we know with previous literature? What we don't know, and why is it important to investigate what we don't know? So that's the gap, okay? And then how does the author analyze the data and represent the data? Okay, so what do you see the data representation and data analysis? And the last point is, what are the roles of the article framework in the narrative inquiry? Okay, so what are the roles of a theoretical framework that you see? Now, can you note down all the questions, and then I'll give you 5 minutes. I'm going to give you 10. Let's do 10 minutes for reflection on this. The article mean my article on narrative inquiry. So please note down the question first. Okay, I'm going to give you 5 to 10 minutes to reflect on these questions. Okay. All right, so let's get started. You don't have to talk about each question in order, so you can share your thoughts in, general. So what do you think about the articles? And don't feel that I'm the author of the article, and don't feel that you don't dare to give me constructive feedback, or don't feel that way. So this is a learning opportunity. I know myself that this one is not the best example of narrative inquiry because I'm still not satisfied about my own research. Okay, so what do you think about this article? Okay, anyone want to go first?
Ajahn, I think the slide right now is kind of got stuck. So
Not stuck?
yeah, so on the screen it got some kind of a distorted photos.
Okay, hang on. What about this one?
Okay. Yes.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, who wants to go first? Share your thought on this article.
Anyone would like to try? For me, I think I understand the process or the teacher identity better as you started during the teacher practicum, and you lay out the story from the history, from the background to the current one, and you can draw the conclusion of the teacher identity. So for me, this one is a good in-depth way to understand the experience, just like you mentioned. And it's in particular, it's about how to develop the teacher identity as the pre-service teacher.
All right, Ode, thank you. All right. So anyone else? So Ode mentioned that he learned the stages of identity development, right? Okay, all right. So anyone else? If not, I'm going to do random selection.
I'm just trying to help everyone while they're thinking, but as if nobody wants to. So maybe you.
So I'll do random, okay?
Probably.
All right, so Melam?
Melam, hello? Melam, are you there?
Good morning, everyone.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning. For me, what I see from what I understand from the reading is the gap, maybe research gap is like everybody knows that there are challenges during the teaching practicum, but what is little known is how to deal with those challenges. So this research would help as to how to deal with those challenges and improve. And I would also say that I agree with the oath saying that this is in-depth study regarding the teacher identity, building teacher identity, as the research contributed to saying that the challenges, to overcome the challenges, it needs to be psychologically and technically supported within as well as outside the school.
Okay.
I think that's all I have to say.
All right, thank you. Okay, so next person is Om.
Oh, Dom. Yes.
Dom. Okay, sorry.
Dom.
So as a memoir lover, I really enjoy reading your article, Chan. It was both learning experience. It was a learning experience for me. I got to learn a lot of new things regarding the teaching experience that student teacher face during their practicum year. Because back in my country, I did not do a very long practicum. What I did was only a couple of months. But what they did was they did one whole year and they had to go through a lot. So it was a learning experience for me. And I really enjoyed reading the article. It's like reading a story.
Did you say that you enjoy number or not enjoy number? Can you mention
number?
Again? Yeah, you enjoy as a number person or not a number person?
As a memoir reader, Chan.
Oh, memoir reader. Okay.
Yes.
Sorry. So memoir reader. So you like to read memoir and then you feel that it's connected to you. Okay.
Yes, Chan.
All right. Supitriya.
Good morning.
What happened?
I'm going over there.
So you are with someone in the class, right?
Yeah, right here.
I'm here with
Okay.
Pio ค่ะ
Okay.
Moss.
All right.
and Moss too.
Okay. So what do you think about the article?
So I actually, to be honest with you, I read the wrong article, so I so I had to quickly skim and scan as you were asking other people. But from the quick minutes that I got out of it, you're making me nervous. But from the quick minutes I got out of it, I know that the article was trying to find out what changed in teachers' attitude, right, towards the practice of the before and after the practice, the practicum years. There you go. And then towards I learned that they were doing some like feedback given. You know, so so anyways, I thought that it was good because, you know, when you're trying to inquire about the changes and opinions, I think it's important to allow participants to give feedback rather than, I guess, just like a Q&A and close-ended questions.
All right, thank you. So can I have
mentions about there's no number in the research too.
Yes.
Because she mentioned it just now that this is kind of interesting for her because most of the time she would just read all the quantitative, like all the numbers and analyzing things. But for this one, it's more like a story. So
Yes.
it's quite different. So I think that's one she's mentioned is a good experience
Read
for
the
her.
feedback, yes, rather than numbers.
All right, thank you. All right, so the last person, Duang Kamon.
Yes.
Yes.
So the question is, in general, what do you think about the article, right? Okay. So when the article was about two stories of two student teachers, right? And I kind of feel like it is as if, okay, if it's not research, there are two student teachers telling their stories of their experiences during the teaching practicum to us. And so, okay, so if we listen like that, we may note down important details, but we didn't look at the angle of, let's say, shaping the identity. So that shaping the identity is like the theoretical framework to manage this information that these two student teacher given. So kind of the data have been organized in a theoretical, meaningful ways. Yes, so that's how I feel.
All right, thank you. Okay, so thank you for your details and your reflection on the article. So actually, this one is sent out for publication, and it took me almost 5 years to get finally published, because most of the time I got rejected from papers, you know, journals after journals, journals after journal. This study was my first after I graduated from a doctoral study in the United States. And but it took me 5 years to get finally published. And each year and each journal give me feedback. So I want to share this with you in a sense that this one was a very young researcher, okay, very young researcher trying to write narrative inquiry, okay. And there are this is the finished product of the narrative inquiry. And I got, you know, several rejections, actually 6 rejections before it published. And this journal is called Issues in Educational Research. Okay. So the idea of this article was that when I first graduated and started working at Burapha University, the faculty assigned 10 student teachers for me to supervise. So I automatically have, 10 student teachers, English major, to supervise. So I have to go there and observe them. Okay. The term teacher identity was uh, filter in this process after I spend time with the student teachers. So at first, I was doing my job. I went to the school, talked to the student teachers, observed their instructions. Okay, I hadn't thought about doing research before before talking to them. I was just trying to do my job, supervise, checking their lesson plans. And I think by 8 months, I started to see their struggles, and I started to have this kind of questions. So it seems like these 10 student teachers, they all have struggles, challenging experience. They all have struggles and challenges, and it seems universal. Okay, it seems universal for me as a mentor teacher. Okay, so I started to look into the literature. So when we talk about challenging experiences, uh, struggling experiences for student teacher, what kind of literature, what is the vocabulary that the literature care about? And I actually found that they talk about learning to teach. Okay, so that's if you look at the abstract, right? Learning to teach during the teaching practicum. So the literature used this term as the focus to explore student experience. Now, when they talk about learning to teach, a lot of them has been done to explore their challenging experiences. What are the challenges? Now, what do we know about previous studies? They pointed out challenging experiences. They can list down challenging experience. But what's been missing out or the gap is that how they overcome those challenges. And at that time, the Faculty of Education organized a one-year teaching practicum. Okay, so it's like a 1 year. So until the 8 month that I started to see their struggling coming into play. Okay, now previous literature used the term teacher identity to explore learning to teach because they feel that learning to teach is the process of developing teacher identity. So that's why I say use teacher identity as an analytic lens. What it means is that we use it as a focus to analyze their experience. Okay, we use it to as a theoretical framework to guide the process of data collection and data analysis. Okay. Now, since I have 10 student teachers at that time, I email them, okay, all 10 student teachers. And then only 3 people participated in this research, okay, decided to participate. So I focus on these 3 teachers. So I interview them and I shadow them, okay. Uh, if you look at the data collection method, I actually use the word shadowing technique. So we can talk about that technique later. So I shadow them and then I observe the I, I, I interview them, okay, in order to gain a set of experiences and how they overcome those challenges. And I analyze the data and I also found these findings, okay? We are going to particularly focus on data analysis and also data representation today, okay? Now, when you write journal publication, right? So you need to connect what you want to study. So as you can see, I started the research questions come after I visited the experience. I'm there in the field, okay? It's very typical for qualitative research that the researcher will be there in the field and research question will started to form there. So I talk about, teaching practicum and the importance of it, right? And then I talk about the dynamics of practicum research, right? During the 1960s, it talks about trying to identify right skills or teaching behaviors for student teachers to achieve effective teachings. And later on, during the 1980s, it was about examining teacher beliefs and also to provide list of skills and behaviors. But only recently, it was pointed out that learning to teach is actually about developing identity or forming teacher identity. So I want to use teacher identity as an analytic lens to explore student-teacher experiences. Now, when the focus is on teaching experience or experience of human beings, right? This kind of research work very well with it's suitable very well with narrative inquiry, because narrative inquiry is interested in exploring human experience. And the experience in this research is teaching practicum experience. Now, so I kind of review, and this is my conceptual framework. Okay, so what do I mean by student-teacher identity? Actually, previous literature used the term teacher identity to refer to both student and also teacher identity, especially in pre-service teachers, because they are expected to perform real teacher responsibility. So I provide the background, right? Teacher education in general has been interested in teacher identity, and also language teacher education in particular also focus on identity. And these are the authors that I provided as an example in language teacher education identity. Now, so I talk about why do we need to care about teacher identity in language teacher education there. And I talk about the definition, right? So the definition of teacher identity is very broad because we never agree what it means by teacher identity. It is very broad, okay? So therefore, in order to understand teacher identity, it is important to situate teacher identity in a particular theoretical framework. So it has to be guided by particular theoretical framework. Now, my theoretical framework comes from define teacher identity as collective stories of oneself as a teacher narrated in context. So I focus on how people tell stories about themselves. And I think last week I mentioned this the stories reflect their identity, okay? And then teacher identity involve their current, okay? Who am I at this moment, and also imagined self-identification, or who do I want to become. And these two aspects of teacher identity uh, are very important for investigating identity of student teachers, because student teachers always reflect on who am I at this moment. Am I a teacher? Am I a student? Or am I a student teacher? Or imagine like what kind of teacher I want to become, right? So if you had experience in the teaching practicum, you always have this question, who am I now? And who do I want to become, okay? And self-identification are inherently multiple, right? Which means that one can tell many stories about themselves. So I acknowledge that there are many stories to tell out there, but the stories that the participant tell are mainly from their perspective, okay? As you can see, I think Duan Kamon mentioned that it's only the perspective of student teachers, okay? That's an important aspect to keep in mind. So these are stories told by student teachers only. When they mention others like the mother, we don't really try to explore from that perspective, okay? And self-identification is deeply rooted in one histories, okay? So what it means is that teacher identity developed before they come to teacher education and before they do teaching practicum already. So they do not enter teacher education program like an empty vessel, okay, vessel, I don't know, to absorb knowledge and skills. Rather, they bring their history with them to teacher education as memories of themselves as students, teachers. Now, adopting teacher identity is not simply about identifying oneself, but rather it has to be an active process, okay? So we call this agency. So teacher identity and agency is related to each other, okay? And then I review previous studies. So this one is related previous studies, okay? And it comes to the research questions. As you can see, research questions are guided by or are guided by theoretical framework and also are mediated by the experience of the researchers themselves. So the research question that I have here is, how was the development of teacher identity shaped by the teaching practicum? And how do student teachers overcome the challenges of teaching practicum? So I would mainly focus on those two aspects, okay? Now, as you can see, so I sent out for the participants, right? The participant, I sent out 10 emails, right? To my group of participants. And then 3 voluntarily responded to the request. So, but unfortunately, the third student teacher, you know, decided to quit the research process. I think that was the experience that I don't know whether who asked these questions, whether I had difficulty collecting information from the participant or not. I would say yes, okay, because one dropped out and then I reported only 2. So not me and Niti, right? Pseudonym. These are pseudonym given by themselves, because when I asked them what kind of pseudonym that you want to represent themselves, they say not me and Niti. And I provided the reason, right? Because their practicum contexts are different. So Natmi placed in secondary school and Niti was placed in an elementary school. So I'm interested in a particularity, okay? And I highlight here very clearly that by examining only 2 student teachers, it was not my intention to claim generalization to other contexts. Rather, the richly descriptive stories of the 2 participants may provide an insight into the complexity of teacher identity development. So I don't want to generalize to all student teachers in Thailand. So, but the stories can provide richly descriptive stories. So those are a little bit background. Now in data collection, right? So I use, actually I didn't use pure narrative inquiry, but I combine with case study. So so if I do narrative inquiry, like hardcore narrative inquiry, it has to be more, you know, stories. I need to go there multiple times, but I want to confine my approach into case study. So case study was integrated because I want to draw the boundaries of units and of analysis. So I want to focus on English teachers only, not other teachers, right? So I want to focus on English major student teachers only. That's the boundary that I want, okay? And then I interview them, right? Only twice per person at the end of 1 year teaching practicum, okay? I rely on their memories to recount, you see that? I rely on their memories to recount their experiences during the 1 year teaching practicum. The interview will say my structure, okay? So talking about this, okay? And apart from the interview, I also conduct 6 shadowing observation per student teachers. So shadowing is a technique, is an observation technique. So if you know like a doctor, right? The doctor, they have shadow, or businessman, they have a job shadow. So they follow this person like a shadow. So I brought that ideas to do my research. So I shadow my student teachers, you know, from the beginning of from the beginning of the school starts until the end of the school starts. So 6 times. So I follow them like a shadow for 6 days. Okay, that's a huge amount of data. And then, so the total hours is 42 hours. Okay, And I asked the participant how to do shadowing. I asked them to identify one typical day, and I follow them like their shadows to document their personal lives. Okay. Now, when we talk about like shadows, it doesn't mean that I stay behind their backs at the time. So it's more like, you know, follow them anywhere that they go. So when I present this to my student, one of my students actually say that, oh, you stalk them like a you're like a stalker of of the student teachers. And I was like, yeah, kind of. And I use a small notebook to record observation to prevent distractions. So I shadow, right? I also, you know, record some of the notes. And in each observation, I wrote few notes. So few notes is like a description of what I saw. Okay. So after, when you shadow, right, you would take just only, you know, keywords, phrases, or the conversation that they have from others. And after that, I immediately expanded that into a story. So a story of one day. Okay. So it is a story of one day. I expand it, you know, put experience into context, and I make it clear here that it should be noted that the expanded few notes were not like a mirror of what happened. Rather, they were influenced by my background. Okay. So why do I need to address this subjectivity at all times? Remember, we talk about narrative inquiry is the co-constructed knowledge between participant and the researchers. So I have to lay it out my subjectivity at all times and throughout the process. So in my earlier version of the rejected version, I did not include these things uh, because I didn't feel that it is important to lay out. But actually, narrative inquiry, you need to lay out your subjectivity from the beginning, okay, until the end of the process. All right. At this point, do you have any questions until the data collection?
Please feel free to ask any questions, or you can type the question in the chat box too. Thank you.
So before we go to the data analysis,
I guess we don't have any
okay,
questions.
all right.
Thank you.
Either I speak very clearly or the other way around. All right. So as you can see, the data collection, now we are going to look at the data analysis and trustworthiness of the data, right? So the main data for this study is interview, okay? So I analyze the data, right? And then if you look at the data analysis, I think you actually can learn a lot from reading this part, because the data analysis, it was not just about, you know, listening to the audio record and try to summarize. You have to follow step by step very carefully. Otherwise, you will miss something else. So what I put down here is that before analyzing the data, the quality of the data was maximized. So I was trying to maximize the quality of the data because as you can see, as a researcher, my subjectivity is influenced along the way from data collection to data analysis. Now, from, you know, accuracy of the transcript, okay, the field note were expanded fully before analysis. So I actually prepare the data ready, which is like within case. So I have 2 student teachers, right? And in each student teacher, I collect 2 interviews and 6 shadowing observations. So I analyzed, you know, all sources of data in one person. And then I also do constant analysis between the 2 people, okay? Now for the vertical analysis, I use 2 different methods. One is the vertical analysis, which is like within case. So I have 2 student teachers, right? And in each student teacher, I collect interview, 2 interviews and 6 shadowing observations. So I analyzed, you know, all sources of data in one person. And then I also do constant analysis between the 2 people, okay? analysis, I analyze the entire set of the data within individual student by using the coding method. Now, in some coding method, it talks more than 3 steps, but I am influenced by Sandana. Okay, Sandana said that to the coding method consists of 3 stages. In some people, they talk about 4 stages. Okay, so open coding, axial coding, and selective coding. Now, in the open coding, right, where the aim was to assign codes to the data with no prior framework. Okay, now this is a tricky part. I know that I want to explore student-teacher identity development, but when I analyze the data, I need to let that framework go. Okay, I need to let that go first, because when you talk about open coding, you really need to be open. Okay, be open. Okay, and you assign codes to the responses. Okay. I rewrite the data and identify initial codes. Some of the example of the codes were teaching is a stable job. That's the code, right? So you label the responses into like a segment of data into a phrase or a sentence that can capture the responses. Okay. Now, growing up in the family of the teacher, see, excitement and worry, reality shock, school policy, school expectations. So these are some of the example of the codes. Now, if you have 30 pages of transcript, then you can have like maybe hundreds of codes. The codes is random now. You assign codes, it can be hundreds of codes, right? Now, in the axial coding stage, I re-examine the codes and I try to identify relationships among them, okay? And to generate categories. Now, when you have, hundreds of codes, you will try to categorize them based on the same relationships, okay? Now, you will have several categories. And in each, after you have several categories, right? In the selective codings, you combine the categories into themes. So themes is actually bigger, and the theme could be used to answer the research questions. Now, at this point, it is where the theoretical framework come into play, right? Student-teacher identity development, you need to filter the codes or the categories. You need to consult with the other theoretical framework at this stage. And then finally, okay, the result from the vertically 3-stage analysis were compared horizontally across cases to examine similarities or differences between the article, okay, between the participants, right? Now, based on emergent themes, can you see that the theme is emerged, which means that you don't have framework before. So they analyze the data inductively. So from specific, right? Specific to general. So started from codes, categories, and then themes. So after that, I re-examine themes again by rereading the original data in order to recheck the original meaning. Okay, and then I composed mini stories. Now, this is the data analysis or the data representation. So when you have themes, right, you need to compose mini stories to represent each theme. And through this process, I began to see the storyline of teacher identity development, which was needed from mini stories. So after you have themes, you wrote a story, very short story, mini story to represent that themes or to tell meaning of that themes. Okay. And then after you see mini story of themes, you will see the storyline of teacher identity development. So in that case, you will see the process, okay? To maximize the trustworthiness of the data analysis, I kept writing reflections to become aware of my subjectivity. And the reflection were used during the data analysis to question the interpretation of the data, okay? And finally, after crafting the narrative, I also sent out the draft to the participant for member checking processes. Now, member check is a technique, okay, to enhance trustworthiness in qualitative research. For member checking, you can do from the transcription. Like, let's say after you transcribe the interview, you send them for review. That's we call member check. Or you can do it during the thematic analysis. You found themes, right? And then you bring to discuss with them, or you write a story of themselves and then send it for them. And their feedback was used to revise the narrative in this paper. Now, if you look at this one, the theme, so I show thematic analysis. These are the codes, right? The codes are not in the same place, but I group them, I try to group them. For example, society values teachers, a sense of mission, job stability, job opportunity, inspiring teachers, growing up in the family of teachers. So when I analyze the data, I see this as, multiple reasons to choose teacher education. So the two student teachers have these multiple reasons, right? So I multiple reasons. And then I also see this category on the codes, concept of a good teacher, image of a teacher by society. So because the participant talk about, now when we talk about teacher, it invokes a particular image. For example, we all know that if we talk about English teacher, right, has to be, modern, dress well, those type of, image that we have. So teacher as a responsible agent, there are always teachers. And then I group them into prior image of a teacher. And these two categories together become the theme is teacher identity is developed based on prior biographies. So I use the word biographies, okay? The next theme would be excitement, right? Ready to teach, pleasant. And you can see these are positive emotional responses to the teaching practicum. And I also found, reality shock, overwhelm, okay? Overwhelm. And these are negative emotional responses. And in the thematic, I talk about emotion shapes teacher identity, okay? And then you can see feel like a student, feel like a teacher. Some student call teacher. This one is self-perception as a teacher, okay? These are the practice, and then practice shape identity. Student uniform, okay? Now, do I have more codes than this? Yes. So, but these are only the codes that matters, that they can group into categories, and then it become themes. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 themes. Okay, 5 themes actually. Okay, and then in the findings, as you can see, these are mini stories that I wrote down. Okay, it's like a story of not me and story of Nikti, something like that. Okay. Do you have any questions of the data analysis and the trustworthiness?
Why do you use the word biographies? Could it be if we can change from prior biography to prior background? Would that be okay too? Is that all right?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
So the themes, are commonly named by the researchers. Okay. The reason that I use biographies because I feel like I feel like biographies is the term related to narrative.
I see.
Because in the concepts of teacher identity, right? So I review that uh, teacher identity was developed earlier in histories. And I don't want to use the word histories because it looks like maybe historical account. So I want to use the word biography because it reflects their narrative that's stored in them. Yes.
Okay. All right. Also, and I have another question from Juanita. She said that, what did you do with the codes that you left out or you cut out, and why did you cut them out?
Okay. What did I do? I just left them. So did not include in the report. Okay. Because they are not related. They could not be answered the research questions. For example, the codes talk about their, what do you call it? I don't remember. It has been 5 years already. So there are some codes that doesn't make sense. Not doesn't make sense. It's not related to identity. What are the codes? Sorry, I don't remember. But after reread the data, you will automatically see that, oh, this one is not related to the research question, so you will not report it.
Yeah. So what you're saying is that we only pick the code that can answer the research question, but not something else, because some things just not relevant to the research question. We just cut those out. Right?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
And another question for me: when you analyze the codings from more than 2, so for example 5 or 6, do you concerned about the high frequencies of the words that appear in the coding before you pick it or select it, or is it has to be just only related to the research question?
I analyzed, so in my another paper I collected 50 student teachers. So in that case I consider the frequencies that appear. But when I report the data, I did not report the frequencies. Because this is the narrative. Yes, one way, it's one way of doing coding is to consider the frequencies that the code come out. Yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions?
Okay, from
Yes,
Young One. Go ahead.
you can answer Young One's question first.
Oh, I'm sorry. Another question: do you have more second or more laters to verify the categorization of coding and themes? So basically, she asked you to have the iterators.
In this, no.
Okay.
And I have reason why. Because in narrative inquiry, you are the one who live with them, right? Who constructed knowledge with them. So I don't want to have someone who don't know the participants to actually analyze the data. Okay, but there's nothing wrong of having iterator to look at your data in order to increase, in order to question your subjectivity. There's nothing wrong with that. Okay, so you can have iterator, or you can have you yourself can do that. But for me, as the narrative inquirer, we believe that it's the co-constructed knowledge between the researcher and the participants, right? That's the main assumption. So having someone else to another co-construct would take away the virtues of narrative inquiry. That's why I did not do it. Okay, but I have seen some people do it, and there's nothing wrong with that. And I'm pretty sure that if you are interested in narrative inquiry, especially young researchers, the committee member will ask you to do that because it requires a lot of training to analyze this data. Okay.
But at the same time, you also check with the participants.
Yeah.
So that's one way to check or verify the validity of the view.
Right.
So okay, another question. Did you interview entire in English?
I actually asked them to choose, and one student teacher is more comfortable using English. So I use both. But they can switch Thai, English, doesn't matter. But one way that I always have question is that even after I interview them in Thai, right? Did I translate it before the analysis, or I translated only the code that I supported? So as you can see, right, here, this is the translated version taking directly from the participants, right? Actually, it's not directly. I actually reduce something. That's what I want to talk about as well. So it's not 100% exact same
Word by
the
word.
participants, yeah, the words, but I did not change drastically to fit in. But I changed it for the purpose of reading, okay, not the purpose of fitting what I want to study. So for me, I did not translate the transcript in English before analysis. So I only translated this one. I would suggest you not to translate before you analyze, because it can lose a lot of emotional responses, or it can lose meanings, a lot of meanings there. Right? Any other questions? Come on, this is the learning opportunity.
That's right. How do you create this storyline? How do you create this mini story from each theme? How do you create the mini stories?
Mini stories. Ah, okay. All right. So for the mini story, right? Mini story come from the theme. So let's say the themes here say that teacher identity developed based on prior biographies. So I need to think about how do I show, not tell, how do I show that this person is trying to figure out their identity, okay? And this trying to figure out has to be related to biographies. So I wrote like a story of this person, like telling the stories. And then when I wrote finish a mini story, I look at it and I check whether my story actually reflect the codes or reflect the categories or not. And another technique that I would recommend is that you have to read a lot of narrative research to be able to see how they use words, how they use how they use word, stars. I actually have a lot of recommendation. I'm going to show it to you today. That one thing that I learned a lot from that article is by Tony Adams. It was not about teacher identity, but it was about, relationship with his father. So I think I saw some question. What's the next question, Ode?
The next question is, in terms of transcript, how can you stay away from your subjective understanding or inference?
Oh, that's a very good question.
Yes.
So after you transcribe, right? One way of staying, or playing with your subjectivity is to fully immerse. So I as I work out, right? I listen to their responses like I'm listening to the music. I listen, I fully immersed. At the same time, I wrote a lot of reflection. I wrote reflection before I analyze the data. After I found something, I actually consult back to my reflection in order to see whether was it the conclusion come from my background, or was it the conclusion come from the data itself. So it's the process of constantly questioning yourself, immersing yourself in the data, write a lot of memos, reflective memo, and consult with the participants. So it's an ongoing process that I do it all the time, talk. And sometimes you have to distance away, do something else. For example, go to a restaurant, enjoy your life, and then come back later to look at the conclusion.
Yes.
Okay, let me show you the what do you call it, the transcript that I transcribed. I'm sorry, it is the, what you call it, the transcript is in Thai. Okay, hang on. The transcript is in Thai, but this one is what I at first I wanted you to transcribe so that you feel what it feels like, okay? But I think this is the data. I don't want to share because this is the real raw data that the participant trust me to give, but this is for pedagogic reasons. So I think I can share with you, but I cannot give you the data, okay? Now, you can see that this is not me interview, right? You need to put the, what do you call it, lie here, and in order to put lie here and then ก็เอาให้เหมือนเป็นธรรมชาติคุยกันไปเรื่อยๆ I'm sorry that I show in Thai, okay? So as you can see, they use like not really, when people speak, right? We don't speak in a very coherent manner.
Right.
We don't really speak perfect grammar. We have pause, right? We have, what do I call it? We have pause. We have
Feeling.
The feeling. Sometimes we laugh during the interview, right? But can you see laughter in here? I didn't include laughter, right?
Yes.
No laughter. And then how can you decide to break? So during the interview, hang on, let me show this. Okay. This is me, A is me, right? ก็เอาให้เหมือนแบบธรรมชาติคุยกันไปเรื่อยๆว่าจะเป็นยังไงอันนี้ก็คือขอบคุณมากที่ให้ความรู้การสัมภาษณ์นะครับด้วยความยินดีค่ะอาจารย์ so she was my student.
Yes.
Okay, ทีนี้จุดประสงค์ก็คือ and I talk about the objective, right? And then ทำไมถึงอยากเรียนครู so I asked her, why do you want to be a teacher? Okay. หนูนะคะทำไมหนูถึงอยากเรียนครูคือแรกๆหนูไม่ได้ตั้งใจจะเรียนครูโดยตรงแต่ว่าคือด้วยความที่หลายๆอย่างอะค่ะโอเคเช่นเหมือนบ้านหนูอย่างนี้ค่ะอาชีพส่วนใหญ่ก็จะเป็นพยาบาลกับครูค่ะหนูก็เริ่มหนูก็เลยเริ่มเรียนครูแล้วก็บวกกับเหตุการณ์ด้วยภาคใต้ในอุดมการณ์ด้วยนิดหนึ่งนะคะอาจารย์ Can you see that by only a few sentences there are a lot of meaning here, so what do you see from the meaning here? So for Thai students, what do you see from this highlighted part?
Okay, I see her context.
Mm-hmm.
The value in her hometown.
Okay,
plus her own ideal, ideal career. Like udamkan, I don't know that thing. Yes.
Yeah, I think I quote like a sense of mission.
Yes.
Yeah, a sense of mission. Was her motivation clear? Like, was it clear cut that I want to be a teacher?
No.
Really?
No. Okay. So it was not clear at all. So it was like multiple reasons, right? Okay. And then she has a sense of mission to help her, to help her like context, right? And then I elaborate more. Ask questions, okay? Okay, this is about the distance. She talks about the distance. And then I asked why in that area they thought that teacher or a nurse is a good job, okay? So she talked about because it's a government officers, the welfares, it's good.
Stable job.
Yeah, stable job. Okay. We learned that her context, though the majority of them are, you know, farmers, right? So stable jobs. Okay. Now, when you quote, when you quote the participants, or you quote both the researchers and the participants when you do coding. So in some code, I also paraphrase, right? Do we quote the researcher paraphrase summary?
I don't think so. I don't know.
No. Okay, good. So when you open coding, even though the researchers, okay, even though the researchers, what do you call, even though the researcher summarize the participant responses, you don't need to quote them, okay? As you can see, and then I started to see that why not a nurse? You see, I started to ask when you say that a nurse or a teacher is, it's a good job, like why not a nurse? So she said that she's afraid of blood, right? Or needles. Okay. And then and she has experience like teaching since she was young, right? She loved teaching job, something. This is an interesting. She wanted to become a teacher, but she was inspired by her chemistry teacher. So it's actually a very good question to ask. Okay. And why coming to Chonburi? Yeah, because she's very far in the south. Okay, so she has, okay. And then the food and everything. Oh, here, I did not include here. This is what I talk about. Like why Chonburi? So I quote here like a close, boring, but because she was bored with her hometown. So I did not really use these kind of codes into categories because it doesn't help us understand teacher identity development. Okay. Maybe in another context, but in the context, I don't include that. Okay. Now in the, what do you call it? After I code, right? And then you need to write a researcher field note. Okay. Researcher field note. This is my own researcher journal. Okay. So I was guided. So I put the research questions or the questions that I have here. Okay. And I actually write reflection. So I wrote something like this. This is the first day that I started to analyze the data for the project. I want to use this data for my manuscript. Every step should be in details. The president is my student teacher. I'm her supervising teacher. I can see that at the beginning of the interview, she was not comfortable. She was afraid that her name would be disclosed. I had to ensure her that I would keep her name confidential. She could use any name that she wanted to, and she would see what I did, everything. She felt better after I went over the process and my theoretical orientation, I guess. I'm listening to the interview record now. It seems that I asked her about life story. Why did she want to study teachers? Does she want to be a teacher? When necessary, I try to include my experiences in the interview to co-construct the meaning and to evoke the participant responses. So this is the reflection after I listened, as you can see, that I also immerse myself in the data, right? So I can see that, oh, sometimes I actually co-construct the meaning. How do student-teacher construct and negotiate their teacher identity during the teaching practicum? This is kind of an answer. Teaching practicum is a transformative experience. It seems that she understands education failure as a source of school management. At the beginning, she felt that she was not a teacher. She wear a student uniform. She only focused on technicality of the teaching. So this is my analysis. Technicality of the teaching. After that, after being in school for a while, it seems like her internalized a sense of being a teacher. How do she pass through the process of struggling? She passed through the challenging experiences by adapting her expectations, roles, techniques, and talk to her mentor. It is the period of adjustment. At the end of the teaching practicum, she stopped calling her mother. Should I say, you see that? This is my conversation about myself. Should I say discourse with herself, her mom, and student? Adapting her expectation. She also started observing teachers that she analyzed. Okay. How does a teaching practicum support her teacher identity construction? Teaching practicum actually helps develop teacher identity as a forum to reflect on her experiences. She has a strong determination to become a teacher, whatever it takes, what challenges she has, she still wants to be a teacher. Does it because of resilience she has? So reflection can be more detailed like this, but I want to keep it simple. The conclusion that I have, those type of thing. Okay. So this is the researcher journal that I wrote down. Okay. All right. So that's the kind of process that I went through. At this point, do you have any questions?
I think the ability to ask questions also a skill. You're just not asking the question. As a researcher, you need to be able to, artfully or articulately try to ask the question. So do you have any suggestion or any tips for that?
All right. So this is what I will tell. First of all, you're right, Oat. Doing qualitative research, you must be trained. You must be trained, okay? Even interviews, right? Doing interviews seems easy, but a lot of time we don't ask the right questions, or a lot of time we ask too direct questions. We don't get layer of data, okay? A lot of time we kind of focus on, we miss out a lot of things, okay? I would suggest that you need to be trained by experienced researchers. And another thing is, what can I say? You need to read a lot about what kind of questions that they ask, how do they present the data. That's the narrative inquirer job, okay? I think it's a very important question, not only for the researchers. When you do qualitative research, I think my teaching, I'm also aware of my teaching skills as well. So when I do narrative inquiry, I learn about student teachers. It also reflects, for example, when they say, I call my mom to discuss these things. Can you see that she didn't discuss with her supervising teacher at the school? She didn't discuss with me. So it reflects me, as a mentor. So she was not really comfortable talking to me. There was some power balance there that she was not there to help, even though I've been trying very supportive and help. So I also learned about that. So my suggestion is to read a lot and get trained.
My next question, when you say we need to read a lot, most of the time, as the amateur researcher, we read the end result, which is the research that is published. But how can we find those interviewing process?
That's a very good question. That's why you're right. Very hard to find. Because the limited space of the journal, okay, because of the, what do I call it, because of the limited space of the journal, and some books it's more like theoretical rather than practical, right? So that's how can you find? Well, difficult to find.
The second option is to get trained, but since we're here for just 2 years, and there's no specific course for qualitative research side. So we combine quantitative and qualitative together. So there are a lot of things to cover in the class. So I think if we need some help, or we need get some help, maybe the advisor, could help you too, because I have a pretty good, I have a very good advisor who helped me in terms of checking and guiding me through the process, even though we have a very short period of time.
Right. I agree. So that's why advisor will help you. It's also as a researcher myself, it's also my mission to spell out some of the parts very clearly so that my student can read. So as you can see from the paper that I show you, I actually wanted to show the data analysis process because I want them to see, right? I want them to see how we analyze the data. So you can see that in some journal, very short, right? 3 paragraphs. Oh no, three sentences, 2 sentences, 3 sentences. But the data analysis for me is only I show in detail so that my student can consult with that work. Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
So Hassan say, thank you for sharing that it's difficult to find detailed process of data analysis in research article. Yes. Even in your dissertation, right? Or in your thesis, the committee will ask you, how do you analyze the data? Very detailed. So you need to show in the step-by-step details. I'm not sure whether my thesis in the TEFL. Did you see my thesis in the TEFL? No?
No.
Okay, I am actually an alumni. Don't go look at it. Okay. I don't know whether I show the process clearly or not. I don't remember anymore. Okay.
Yeah.
Maybe you all can write paper like how to analyze the data. Or I should I write how to analyze the data?
You should. I think and then maybe we'll find you. Yes. Okay, I think that's for this part. I think we got everything covered.
And then I actually have some PowerPoint. Do you want to take 5 minutes break? Let's take 5 minutes break. Okay.
All right. So right now is 11:25, 11:23. So it's about 11:28, 11:30, something like that.
11:30. Let's come back because I want to summarize a few details.
Thank you. So let's take about 5 to 10 minutes. See you again at 11:30. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, so can you all hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. All right. So a moment ago, it was about, practical part, right, of narrative inquiry. Now, so if I connect the example of you read a moment ago about student-teacher identity, right? So it's about human experiences as important, right? So it is important enough for teacher-educator even in Thailand and throughout the world, to learn that student-teacher experiences are helpful for them to understand, right? And then it's interpret narrative in terms of the literature and explore the particularity from the perspective of the participants, okay? So we only focus on the participant perspective, not other people perspective, okay? It's the co-constructed knowledge between the researchers and also the participant to generate the meaning making. All right, now, so we see the gap, right? We see on how I analyze the data and how I represent the data. So I actually represent individual story, okay? So I actually represent in terms of individual story, narrative of not me and narrative of Niti, right? So narrative of not me, as you can see, it reflects the concepts of identity at the beginning, the conceptual framework of identity. And then in the discussion part, in the discussion section is the where I compare between the two stories and summarize in an academic form, okay? How are the roles of theoretical framework? What are the roles of theoretical framework in narrative inquiry? So theoretical framework is only guided. We don't use it to analyze or to form the data. The data is emerged, and we use emergent data to filter through the theoretical framework. Let's talk about transcription a moment ago. So when I transcription, right? So actually, I wanted to ask you about these experiences. When you do research, I would recommend you to transcribe by yourself so that you're listening to the data and also seeing and analyzing the data. And transcribing is not a pleasant activity, but I would encourage you to transcribe it, the the interview by yourself, okay? Even though in my article, I asked someone to transcribe by myself, transcribe for me, and I pay them. But for you as a young researcher, master degree, I would encourage you to transcribe the data by yourself, okay? And it takes a long time. That's what I want to say, okay? Why do we need to transcribe the interview? Some of my students say that, Ajahn, when we interview someone, why don't we just listen to the interviews and then just summarize what we learned from that, okay? Why do we need to do coding? Why do we need to do categories? Why do we need to do themings, whereas the end result is the same, right? They always ask me this question, and I will always say that please transcribe the interview because this is the process. If you only summarize what you know or from listening, okay, you actually miss a lot of information, and you actually miss details, and it's very biased by nature because you summarize it by yourself. You didn't question the data enough. But if you go through the process of coding, axial coding, selective coding, you are playing with your subjectivity. It's more research process rather than not transcribing. Hammersley said that, why do we need to transcribe? It stems from the notion of data. So the data, actually, this is the theory part. Data are believed that are given from the outside. So someone give our data, like the participant give us the interview, right? And when we interview them, the data are used to make inferences, okay? And then it is always theory latent, and not automatically valid. So data is give us. As a researcher, we need to analyze it. And we need to transcribe the data because people value text more than oral text. That's the reason why. Is it possible to transcribe in the interview verbatim, like what they say exactly and into the text? So I would say no. And don't include the word, I will transcribe the interview verbatim. There's no way that we can transcribe the interview verbatim. And these are the reasons why. So a lot of time, emotional context or nonverbal communication are not captured in the audio records, right? So there's no way that we transcribe verbatim. Even though emotions can be translated into intonation, pauses, laughter, they are difficult to put into text, okay? So the notion of transcript verbatim is problematic by nature. So when you put into your thesis, I would not recommend you to say the interview will be transcribed verbatim, okay? But just say the quality of the transcript was maximized, okay? For example, this one, they study the transcript by professional transcript. So on the right column, right, as recorded in the audio tapes. So those are the as recorded in the audio tapes. The audio tapes say that it's been kind of tacit assumption that we would go to with whatever the province health policies are. But the transcript say, can you see that says something very different? And these are professional transcribers. So can you see that we cannot really transcribe verbatim in that sense, okay? And some people recommended to use this very details, like point 4, for example, in parentheses, and then point 4, it's been the number indicated estimate elapsed times in silence. So silence for 4 seconds. That's too much detail, right? So we use this one in classroom discourse or in other analysis like context analysis or discourse analysis, okay? Transcription process, problematic by nature, okay? And then we need to acknowledge the complexity of transcription process. Decision to be made of transcription, how much to transcribe. Will you include in your transcript? How to represent the recorded talk, yes or yeah? Like if someone say yeah, do you put yeah or yes? Depending on you, you have to do it by yourself, create the system. Whether to include non-word elements like okay. Should silence and pause be included? Should relevant gesture be included? How to label the speakers. So in my transcript, I only say A and B, right? It depends on you. You need to really decide it by yourself. How much of it to include in the research report? So which code to include? Transcription quality, we need as an important part of data quality. Okay, I'm going to skip this one. Now to analyze the data, to tear it apart and put it back together. And then Denchai will say to analyze, organize, and represent. And in narrative inquiry, we restoring the story into meaningful form, right? I'm going to call to skip this one. I think we talk about coding process, right? Okay. Now in the selective coding, you will see aha moment, something like that. Okay, we call aha moment. And you need to keep writing analytic memo. Okay. Now my question to you is, now after you find aha moment, okay, a lot of time we are so pumped and so excited. We want to share with our classmates, and we want to share with our advisors. So my recommendation would be, if when you find something during the analysis, don't talk to anyone else. Put it in writing first before talking to anyone else. Okay. And when you talk about coding, are there anything wrong? Like let's say, for example, I see a sense of mission, right? And someone may see the values or the responsibility. Is there anything wrong with that code? Nothing wrong with that code, okay? The researcher will see different codes, and don't be afraid. Is the code wrong? Is the code right? Don't ask us questions, because coding is an ongoing revision. You can revise. If it doesn't capture the nature of the data, you can revise it, okay? And when you see aha moment in the answer to your research questions, please release it in writing, not talk to someone else, Okay, if you talk to someone else, you will lose the analysis. That's my recommendation. Some people don't use coding process. Okay, you can use Zoom model. I use in my article, in the other two articles, I use Zoom model. In the Zoom model, Pamphilon talked about 4 levels of analysis. Pamphilon said that the first one, you need to look at the macro zoom, which is the socio-cultural dimensions. In what context that the story is told? That's the question when they analyze the zoom model, okay? And then the meso zoom model, it's the individual process of storying. How do participants tell the stories? Do they tell from the future first, or they tell, you know, retrospectively? So talking about the style of retelling story. And micro zoom level, zoom into the affective complexity of stories, the emotion, right? Emotion complexity of the story. And the interactional zoom, like the researchers zoom within themselves. Zoom worked very well when I used with the data, because it's allowed me not to conclude immediately. For example, you can zoom into the word choices that they use, right? The intonation that they use, that very details. At the same time, you have to zoom out to look at the big picture. So it allows you the metaphor of data analysis, like don't conclude immediately, zoom in and zoom out the data. Okay, issues to consider when you do art analysis. To analyze the data, I am influenced a lot by Walcott question. I always ask, what's going on here? What do I see here? Okay, and then ask yourself, did you provide enough description or interpretation? So this is one thing that I want you to consider. When you analyze the data, or when you tell stories or retell story of the participant, do you just provide description or do you interpret? Okay, if it is only description, like story, what happened first, second, third, that's not the researcher job. You only describe. You have to interpret the data. Okay, and I will show you what the interpretation look like. So description is describe what you found, right? Interpretation is explain the meaning of what you found. So in doing data analysis, especially narrative or qualitative, you need to balance between description and interpretation. When you write mini stories, for example, right? Did you just describe, or did you also include interpretation? Okay, that's the thing that you consider. Okay, tips when you do data analysis. I always ask my student to say, think graphically. Okay, when you have more than 2 or even 2 participants, to help you see the data or compare, you need to think graphically, or use graphic to help you understand like what's going on. And actually these tips help very well with young researchers. Like after you see the themes, right? How are the themes connected, right? Can you represent the themes or the storylines in graphics? Okay. And keep writing reflections, okay, in order to play with your subjectivity. And also read, reread, rethink about the data, question the data, writing reflections, think graphically until you find aha moment. Now, how can you represent the data? There are multiple ways to represent the data, right? So are you going to present individual story, or are you going to combine them? Depending on you, depending on the findings, okay? For the data representation, actually, when I got rejected, the paper, right? I got rejected 6 times from 6 journals. They always give this comment to me. They say that your data representation is boring. Okay. They say that your data representation is boring. And they actually suggested me to read an article, to read an article on how to make qualitative research reports less boring. So techniques to write creative nonfiction. Now, if you want to be a good writer, or I think I would recommend you to read this paper. Okay, they say that it's very dry. Okay, they say that I did narrative inquiry, but my finding it's like typical qualitative research report. That's we have themes and other things. So I actually have to rewrite a lot. Okay, and in this paper I can send to you later on. Okay, Chloe say that first of all we can open text with vivid and vital. Okay, and we can describe like scene by scene writing. Okay, like scene by scene moving on to another scene. Okay, and we have to use realistic details. It has to be details. And show, don't tell exactly what happened, but show them what happened. Okay, and then the killer's bees and the active voice. So try to get rid of passive voice and try to use the active voice more than passive voice. Okay, capture conversation. In some part, you need to provide quotes in quotation. Okay, and also point of view. Do you want to describe first person or third person, depending on you? Okay. And I would say this is my own recommendation for my student who do narrative inquiry. To write a good narrative inquiry report, you need to use good verbs rather than adjective. So narrative is not about describing something using fancy adjective. No, it's about the verb that capture that capture better than the adjective. Okay, so use good verb to describe what happened. Okay. Now the quality of the narrative inquiry is evaluated in terms of authenticity and aesthetic rather than trustworthiness. Okay. Now narrative inquiry is evaluated in terms of authenticity. Now it's very subjective term. Okay. As you can see in my paper, I use the word trustworthiness because the editors are more comfortable with the word trustworthiness. Actually, uh, my previous draft, I used the word authenticity, but they say they're more comfortable with the word trustworthiness. Okay, and what does it mean is that it has to be engaging, it sounds true, and it reflects the literature. Okay, and Stake talk about naturalistic generalization in terms of that generalization in terms of reader response. Now when Dom, right, when Dom give us reflection that when he read the stories of the two, he kind of made connection to that. He kind of understand what it feel like, and he compare with his experience back home in Cambodia. That is what we call naturalistic generalization. It's an automatic process of readers reading narrative inquiry. Okay. And if you're interested in more narrative inquiry, okay, these are the book that I recommend you to read. The purple one on narrative inquiry is very useful. And also Gary Buck and Buck, I don't know how to say his name, Gary, okay. Gary is very well known in our field. And Cladinin, okay, Phil Benson, recently he started to be interested in narrative inquiry. These are the books that you can use, okay. Another one that you can read is my paper on this, the narrative of learning to become English teachers in Thailand. This one I use narrative inquiry with 50. The previous one was 2 student teachers. This one was 50 student teachers. And the data representation is actually different from the story that you see. Okay. Now let me show you the how what do I mean by description and interpretation, right? Hang on. Okay. So narrative of not me. Can I have a volunteer to read the first paragraph? Okay.
Okay, so the first paragraph, Supawadi, would you like to do it?
Thank you, Ot.
You're welcome.
พี่โอ๊ต
Hello.
thank you for your inviting.
You miss you.
Okay. For the
Not
first
me.
paragraph,
Not me. Yes.
Not me is a 22-year-old female student teacher born in the faraway south of Thailand. She immigrated to pursue a Bachelor of Education in Teaching English at a university located in the East. She entered teacher education with a strong determination to become a teacher, which was needed in the constellation of factors such as dream job, professional stability, job opportunity, and helping her hometown, she narrated.
Okay, thank you. So based on only the first paragraph, do you see that there are both description and interpretation there? Which part is a description? Is you describe things. Interpretation is you explain. This is the description, right? Okay. But this one is the far away south of Thailand. Far away south, it's more like interpretation. Because she mentioned that she was born and raised in the south, right? In Pattani. So I use the word far away south, okay? She immigrated to pursue a bachelor education located in the East. This is description, right? You only described. And this one is interpretation. She entered teacher education with a strong, can you see that? Strong determination. That's interpretation. You need to have a sense of like, oh, the strong determination to become a teacher, which was nested in the constellation of factors such as, okay? And then she narrated here, okay? Not me brought this motivation as a simple concept of a good teacher as a person who gets along with the student, okay? Can you see that? Simple concept of a good teacher, it's the interpretation, right? So when she talk about what it means by a teacher, when I look at the data, that's a simple concept of being a good teacher. Okay, so I interpret, okay? These background form her initial identity. This is also interpretation. So when she say that a good teacher should have relationship or get along, can you see that? She mentioned good teacher as someone who get along with the student. This is very simplistic concept. And these concepts form her identity. Can you see that? Form her identity. And this is scene one. Scene one, right? Remember we talk about scene by scene writing. So this is scene one. And the next one is scene two, right? Scene two, when asked what kind of teacher she wanted to be. Now, this one has to be when asked. Why do you need to talk about when asked? Because remember I use interview and shadowing observation, right? Interview and shadowing observation. Now you need, when you write data representation, we need to see where the data from. So when this one, the data is from interview, right? When asked what kind of teacher she wanted to be, she reported that she could see herself as a kind-hearted teacher who has positive relationship with students. The teacher identity was partly derived from her impression of her teacher in the secondary school, whom she described her as idols to step into the teaching profession. So this is like the interpretation, right? with a clear goal to become a teacher. Natmi invested her effort. This is scene 3. So I talk about her experiences during teacher education. So she tried so hard, right? Invested her effort into teacher education classes. Okay. And then the picture, another scene is about she was assigned to teach in the preaching practicum, right? And then she talked about emotion, right? Frustrated even before she started to teaching practicum. The frustration strongly affected, can you see that? Strongly affected her initial teacher identity. So can you see that I tried to connect with the theoretical framework, like the identity part? During this stage, her conception of teaching changed to the traditional view of teaching in Thailand context, where teacher is the authority of knowledge whom student must respect and follows. This is the analysis or the interpretation, right? Not me what assigned to teach 12 hours per week. This is the description, no analysis, right? We only describe what happened and has 6 hours of extra responsibility. Natmi was also required to submit lesson plan to her mentor teacher for approval. Okay, at the end of the semester, she had to take a teaching test, which was able to be evaluated by the school committee. So these are description, right? And then this one what I show. This one is I show, not tell. On the first day of teaching, Natmi looked at herself in the mirror, okay, checking appropriateness of her uniform. Do you think I know that? Do you think I follow her into room? I didn't follow her into to see that. I didn't see firsthand experience. Okay. But when she reported to me, she said that she was so ready. She was so ready to teach her first class. So
that's why you come up with this sentence.
Yes.
But she didn't say it specifically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So the message, this is what we call show, don't tell, right? So this is like a narrative, right? Look at herself in the mirror, checking the appropriateness of her uniform. She didn't say that she checked her uniform before she teach. She didn't say that, but I show that she was so ready, right? She was ready to teach her first class, excited. Not me remember vividly her first class, fail. You see, the analysis failed. Okay, having feeling failure on the first day, Nasmi was discouraged. She called her mother to seek advice. Okay, and that's something. And based on the code, okay, in the second semester, can you see the timeline now? The first semester, the second semester, you can see the changing now. Okay, and okay, this is the last part that I don't know whether you catch this or not. In the last interview, Natmi affirmed that she would enter the teaching profession even though she had faced challenging situation during the teaching practicum. Why? I asked immediately. It's just I want to be a teacher. Natmi answered with a smile. She did not smile at that time. Okay, I remember. But why did I say with a smile? It's this one, the literature always say that when someone want to become a teacher or how their teacher identity develop depends on their biographies, not depend on the experience of teaching practicum. So it's the process of apprenticeships of observation. So when someone decided to become a teacher, it was heavily on their biographies, not the training itself. That's the message that I want to see. Okay. Now, when I have Niti, right? Because since I say that I use comparisons. Now, in the data representation, you also have to compare or make reference back to NatMe. Like unlike NatMe, who entered having a strong determination to become a teacher, Niti decided to enter teacher education because of his mother influence. Okay. Read on and on and on. Okay. He talks about I'm ready to be a teacher. Okay, readiness. So Niti is a literature that try argue that the Niti story represent the literature that argues that training during the teaching practicum is most effective way that one can become a teacher because he felt ready. Okay, so the two story itself represent the literature, the argument, and the debate of the teaching practicum field. That's why every word here that you have, that you read, reflect the theoretical framework or reflect the debate in the field. It's not just a story that you read for fun, okay? It's story that each word was carefully chosen to reflect, carefully designed, okay? Carefully chosen to reflect the meaning of it, okay? The meaning of the participant from the perspective, okay? And there are key words that the literature here, the literature of the teaching practicum or teacher identity emphasize. Now, I want you to, if you want to learn more about this, you can actually read later. But I want to show you another article that I actually loved. It was about Tony Adams. He was not, this article is like always my favorite because he's so genius. It's not about teaching particular, but it's about his relationship with his father. Tony Adam identified himself as gay and he has problem with his father, okay? And the article is called Seeking Father, Relationally Reframing a Troubled Love Story. So trouble love story with his father. So the relationship with his father. You know, when someone is gay in probably in the United States, they have this kind of trouble. So he wrote a story of himself, right? Okay. Now, Ode, can you pick one person to help me read the narrative?
Definitely, and that person goes to Galtida to make sure that she's here today.
Okay, Galtida.
โอเคค่ะ
Hello.
อาจารย์พรพิมล say
Yes.
hi last week. อาจารย์พรพิมล say hi last week.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for last week. Okay. Okay, so I can read this chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so my mom's always told me that I either be gay or that I marry a black woman. From 16 on, I heard this every time I found myself in a duel with my father. Every time I informed her of my hatred toward that man. Every time I wished him dead, my mom always told me that I'll either be gay or that I'll marry a black woman. Now that I had articulated my desire for one or the other, but rather she knew of my father's two main fears, having a fact in a family or a cross-race relationship, and she realized I do everything in my power to spite him.
Mm-hmm. Can you read more? Yeah.
Continue from the above. Okay. My mom always told me that I'll either be gay or that I'll marry a black woman. A statement that became actualized when I came out to her at 22. Her response, I told you so. I'm often asked how long I've known that I've been gay. Well, that depends. I've known that I've been attracted toward men since an early age, but I didn't know that I fit into the category of gay until the latter part of my teens. And although I do not believe that my gayness was ever a choice, this framing by my mother and my constant desire to spite my father make it appear as such. My story is not just about being gay, though. It's a story about the troubling relationship that separates my father from me and me from him. It's a story of sexuality and sport, of gayness and hegemonic masculinity, of a fact in his golf club,
and it's a story of love and hate.
Okay, so this one is like literature, right? Literature in the field. So can you see that he repeats like this, right? He repeat this so that it intensify the feeling of reading it, okay? And then he put this in his literature review. Can you see that? Now, when this article is good in a sense that it started with the story. So he want to emphasize that story is more important than literature. So that's that. And then he talk about literature. This one is academic. So he interrupt the academic with stories. Okay. And I actually like this one. This is a good example of show, not tell. Okay. Ode, can you pick me another one character?
Cannot be anyone else except touch a grid.
Okay.
Touch a grid.
Character. This is story. This is story. Very short, right? Story. Okay. Character.
Okay, father, middle-aged man who wants to say, son, come here. Son. Mid-20s man who wants to say, father, why? Son. Mid-20 man who wants to say, father, come here. Father. Middle-aged man who wants to say, son, why?
Intense.
Mothers, sisters, aunts, grandparents, friends, various ages who constantly say, I don't know what to say.
Can you see that? This is a very good example of show, don't tell. So what meaning do you get from here, from reading this one? Yes?
The meaning that, I think the son, he just want to have like the power as if his father has like the word to say like, son, come here. So instead of saying that, he wants to say, father, come here.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of letting his father to say so to him.
Mm-hmm. All right. Okay. What are others? What do you see from reading this very short description?
I think each one tried to make the other understand his story.
Mm-hmm.
Like son wants his father to understand that he is gay, and father wants his son to understand why gay is not an option here.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. What about others? Do you see the issue of trust here?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Okay, Duangkamon, what do you see from this very short snapshot?
I just see that they don't like each other and they will never be, and the others cannot help them like each other.
Right.
Either, yeah.
When father just want to like, son, come here, just come, and then son is very like, he doesn't trust his father, like, and then he always like have this kind of speculation, why, right? And then son always say, father, come here, and then father always has this kind of doubt, like, why? And the rest of the family just so bored, right? And then he's like, I don't know what to say. So can you see that the relationships that they have is built upon not like trust each other, right? So just come here, right? It's just like, so this is what we call show, don't tell. Now, if you read the literature here, you will see why the author present like that. Okay, and here, this is another one, tailing. Okay, tailing and showing. So I'm going to read this one. My father's father physically and emotionally abused him and his mother. My father's father did not want a son or a daughter, especially one of each. So he treated them as though he didn't exist. My father's father taught him to be emotionally cold and others. to hit if necessary, and to have resentment toward children. My father loved his father. Okay? It's very short, but emotionally engaged and attacked. And I think the author probably analyze the data from various perspectives and then come up with this one. Even though his father hate him, but his father loved his father. So it's like troubling relationship, okay? And you can see, if you read on and on and on, you will see his style of writing, okay? I'm going to send it to you later on. This is one type of narrative that I actually learned a lot from this article, okay? All right, so I think we passed over time, and I would like to spend my last question on the fundamental question that we have. Okay, hang on. Okay, I want to spend only 3 minutes to finish this one. Okay, so this is the book that if you're interested in the field, and this is one type of narrative inquiry that I collect more than 2 participants, which is like 50 participants. So here's the last question that I want to emphasize. After you learn about narrative inquiry, do you think it's research or just stories, and why? Now, I'd like to hear from a lot of people now who haven't talked today, Ed.
Okay, so today let's try Benjamin Josagon. Benjamin, would you like to try? And then Josagon.
So is it research? Is narrative inquiry research or just story, and why?
From what I understand, I think that is the research, because like based on your research, I can see like we can use the narrative data, or we can use data that we receive from the participant to analyze, and then we can use the data that we receive to answer the research question. So I think that is can be the research.
Okay.
Josagon, please.
And next is Wyatt. Josagon? Josagon, are you there? Okay. So can I ask Wyatt? He's from EIL. Wyatt, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Would you like to share your answer, please?
So I think it's research, because not only you need to tell the stories, and also you need to maybe interpret and give more your analyze to the stories. So I think it's research.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Great. What about some perspective from Kimli from Bhutan?
Hello.
Yeah.
I also feel it is a research, because you get the stories from the participants, and then you use that stories to analyze and interpret. And you use, in the narrative inquiry, you use a lot of interpretations and analysis. So it is a research, whereas stories are used as some kind of a tool to interpret and analyze. So I think it is a research.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you.
Would you like some more?
Yes, one more, please.
Okay. Juanita, would you like to sum up this or answer this question, please?
Sure. So I think the narrative inquiry is a research, because there is a process to gather the information along the way. And then it's not just like a random story. We have to, the story have the purpose of it, and it has a meaning that we have to analyze and then interpret it in the end.
Mm-hmm. All right, thank you. All right, so this is a fundamental question and criticism of narrative inquiry. If you work with narrative inquiry, you always receive criticism that it's just stories. Okay, it is just stories. Now, if you were narrative inquiry will say it's not just story, it's research. So after you learn all of this, I hope you can see that it is a unique research methodology or a unique research approach that can be gathered or used to analyze participant stories. Okay. If you ask me whether it's research or stories, I would say it's research because it has a purpose, it has a process, and it is meaningful that the literature cares about. Okay, whereas other people may disagree, and it's okay. So hopefully, after you learn all of this, you understand the process from conceptualizing narrative inquiry, the kind of questions that is appropriate for narrative inquiry, and you have some knowledge to understand whether it's research or just story. So I'll leave you just to answer this question to others or by yourself. All right, so I would like to thank you very much, everyone, for your participation. And I would like to thank you, Dr. Ponpimon, even though she's not here, but I would like to thank you her for inviting me to share a passion of mine. Okay, if you're interested in doing narrative inquiry, there are still rooms to do research. Even though it's feel complicated, but it actually benefits a lot. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you very much. Okay, so Pichaya, we have the final gratitude to you. Thank you.
All right, okay.
So on behalf of our group here today and from last week, we would like to thank you, Ajaran Denchai, for sharing your knowledge and passion on qualitative research, as well as the inquiry. I think we learned a lot, and I think that your passion has inspired like many of us to be thinking about, conducting this type of research and, to make things that seems quite complicated to be like simpler. So we would like to thank you so much for giving us this learning experience and, to make this workshop very interactive so that we can learn as we go.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very
Now,
much.
last picture. Okay, Moss. Picture. How can we do picture? Hang on. Moss capture na Moss.
Yes.
I need to change to my background first. I want to go to.
No problem. We can wait.
I want to go to what's that? Oh no, go to San Fran ดีกว่า
Okay.
Okay.
Yourself.
Oh, we have student from SUT as well. Jing He and Jing He, she's a PhD student observing, and
Hello, everyone.
Lu, right?
Yeah, Mr. Liu.
Mr. Liu. Okay, there are students from SUT Suranari. They're PhD student. Both of them work on, like Lu working on global English language teaching, right?
Awesome.
And Jing He is focusing on textbook analysis by neoliberalism, which is very interesting.
Wow. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Okay. Mark, พี่พร้อมแล้ว
1, 2. Okay, one more. 1, 2. Okay, guys, mini heart.
A mini heart. Oh.
Sorry, guys.
1, 2. Okay.
Well, thank you very much.
Bye bye.
Thank you, Ajaran.
Bye bye. Thank you, everyone. So